They eliminated the entire supply chain team. That's what he said, right there in the middle of our department huddle, while we were still passing around the email confirmation that we'd just saved Regional Memorial Health System $4.3 million in a single fiscal year. Not 40%, not even 100% over target, 310% above every benchmark they'd set for us going into January. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 54 years old, and I've been director of supply chain operations at this hospital network for 16 years. I started as a warehouse coordinator on the overnight shift, loading surgical supply carts while residents slept in the hallways between rotations. Worked every level of this department before they gave me the office with my name on the door. 16 years of learning where every dollar goes, where every waste point hides, and how to keep 5 hospitals and 3 urgent care centers stocked when the entire supply chain industry decides to have a crisis. The huddle was supposed to be a celebration. Diane from procurement had brought her famous lemon bars. Tom, my logistics coordinator for 11 years, had actually ironed his shirt for the occasion, which meant more than any performance award. Even quiet Carl from the receiving dock had come upstairs and was smiling in the corner with a paper plate and a soda. These were the people who had worked 20-hour shifts during the ventilator shortage, who had rerouted entire vendor relationships in 72 hours when our biggest distributor went bankrupt mid-contract, who had delivered results that most supply chain directors at systems twice our size couldn't touch. Then the CFO's son walked in. He didn't knock. He never knocked. Brendan Cole had been named Vice President of Operational Efficiency 4 months earlier, a title that hadn't existed before his father created it, and he entered every room like the architectural plans had been drawn with him in mind. 31 years old, Wharton MBA, framed above his standing desk, hair gelled with the kind of precision that suggested he thought about it more than he thought about hospital bed occupancy rates. He smiled the way people smile in stock photos for corporate leadership seminars. He looked around the room, clocked the lemon bars, and did not register their significance at all. Great quarter, everybody, he said. Genuinely impressive numbers. Which is exactly why we've made a strategic decision to restructure this department going forward. Year-end performance bonuses are being redirected to fund our new centralized efficiency platform. Your contributions have proven the baseline. Now we need to operate at this level without the additional compensation incentive structure. Diane stopped chewing. Tom's ironed shirt suddenly looked like he'd wasted his morning. Carl set his soda down very carefully, the way you set something down when you're worried your hands might do something you can't take back. I didn't move, just watched him standing there with his blazer and his confidence and his complete inability to read a room full of exhausted people who had earned something and were now watching it disappear in real time. He added something about realignment and scalable frameworks and organizational evolution. I didn't hear most of it. I was doing math. Specifically, I was thinking about a clause on page 19 of my original employment contract, signed by his father 16 years ago, during a time when nobody in this building thought the numbers in that clause were actually achievable. I looked at Brendan and said, quietly, "Can I see you in my office for a minute?" He seemed mildly surprised that I wasn't arguing, which told me everything I needed to know about how he thought this conversation was going to go. "Sure," he said. 5 minutes. I told Tom to save me a lemon bar. Then I walked out. Brendan Cole had arrived at Regional Memorial exactly the way a storm arrives in August, humid and loud and full of itself. His father, the CFO, Richard Cole, had announced it on a Thursday afternoon call with department heads. "Just a structural addition," Richard had said. "Brendan will be getting familiar with operations across all 5 sites. Fresh perspective. High level. Fresh perspective." I'd heard that phrase before. It usually meant someone was about to mistake inexperience for insight. Brendan showed up on his first Monday with a consultant from a firm whose entire portfolio appeared to be tech startups and food delivery apps. The consultant's name was Chad, and Chad did not know what par levels were. Chad thought a formulary was some kind of manufacturing plant. Chad used the phrase ecosystem disruption while standing next to a shelf of surgical gloves. I spent that first week watching and saying almost nothing. Brendan's first full-week initiative was what he called an operational efficiency sprint. This involved rescheduling every standing meeting in the department, introducing a project management software that none of our vendors were compatible with, and mandating that all internal communications go through a new platform that charged per user and crashed twice on day 1. I kept running the department quietly, The way you keep running something when you've been doing it long enough to know that the people who announce change loudest usually leave fastest. Then he restructured the vendor relationship team. Diane Patel had managed our top 30 vendor accounts for 9 years. She knew the account reps by name, by family situation, by which ones would give us an extended payment window when our budget got frozen during a state audit, and which ones would penalize us for being 48 hours late on an invoice. That kind of relationship knowledge doesn't live in a database. It lives in a person. Brendan moved her to what he called a strategic advisory role, which meant she no longer had a direct team, a budget line, or any real authority. It was the corporate version of being walked to a window seat and handed a magazine. Tom Hardigan, my logistics coordinator, was put on what Brendan described as a process review sabbatical. Tom had not asked for a sabbatical. Tom had been planning the rollout of our new cross-site inventory routing system for 8 months. By the end of Brendan's second month, I was the only person in supply chain leadership who hadn't been reassigned, sidelined, or quietly edged toward a door. I think he left me in place because he needed someone who actually knew how to keep the hospital stocked, while he rebuilt everything around that function, according to his vision. His vision involved a lot of dashboards. The dashboards were genuinely beautiful. They showed almost nothing useful. He brought in his college roommate as head of vendor innovation strategy. His college roommate's previous job had been at a subscription box company. He referred to surgical supply contracts as product partnerships. I sat through a 40-minute presentation he gave on gamifying procurement metrics and said nothing, because I was still doing math. The Ford contract, or the equivalent of it in our world, came in the form of MetaTrust Regional, a 7-hospital coalition that was looking to consolidate its supply chain under a single management partner. They needed someone with multi-site experience, regulatory compliance history, and the operational credibility to manage $22 million in annual supply volume. It was the kind of contract that would define the next decade of this system's financial health. I had been building toward it for 3 years. The relationship with MetaTrust's chief operating officer had started as a conversation at a regional conference, turned into a quarterly check-in, and grown into genuine trust built on years of delivering exactly what I promised. She knew our numbers. She trusted our process. Brendan found out about the partnership opportunity 2 weeks before the final presentation and inserted himself as lead. I prepared him, built a comprehensive briefing document, walked him through our compliance certifications, explained the specific regulatory environment MetaTrust operated in, and gave him 3 practice runs with simulated questions from their operations team. He spent most of the third practice run asking whether the slide deck font was on brand. He walked into that final presentation and used the phrase supply chain synergy ecosystem 4 times in the first 10 minutes. MetaTrust's Ku, who had been doing this for 25 years, looked at me once across the table with an expression I recognized. It was the expression of someone deciding whether the institution is worth the representative. We got the contract because of our compliance record, our cost reduction history, and because she knew that I would be the one actually running the operation, not because of anything Brendan said. The next morning, there was a system-wide email from him with the subject line, "Strategic Growth Milestone MetaTrust Partnership Secured." The opening line credited his innovative approach to stakeholder engagement and partnership architecture. My name appeared once, in the 4th paragraph, listed among department contributors. I printed that email, folded it, put it in my desk drawer. Then I opened my personnel file and pulled out a document I hadn't looked at in 3 years. It was a Wednesday night in late October, the kind of night where the building goes quiet except for the hum of the server room down the hall and the distant sound of the parking structure gate cycling open and shut for the last of the evening shift. I'd sent everyone home hours ago. The fiscal year numbers had just been finalized by finance, and I had been the last person in the building with full access to the consolidated report. I opened the spreadsheet and sat with it for a while. Total supply chain cost reduction for the fiscal year: $4.31 million against a target of $1.39 million, 310% of benchmark. I had known for weeks that we were tracking toward this number. I had also known, for 16 years, what that number would mean if we ever hit it. I reached into the bottom drawer of my filing cabinet and pulled out the original manila folder, my employment contract, signed in this same office, when Richard Cole was still building the finance team from scratch, and both of us were younger and less tired. Page 19. Section 7, Addendum B, Paragraph 4. In the event that annual supply chain cost reduction outcomes under the direct operational leadership of Marcus James Webb exceed 275% of established fiscal year benchmarks, as certified by the system's chief financial officer, said director shall be granted immediate temporary procurement and vendor contract authority, including but not limited to right of first review on all supply-related executive decisions, pending board acknowledgement. This provision is binding for one full subsequent fiscal quarter and shall not be superseded by interim organizational appointments. Richard Cole's signature was at the bottom. Date. Witness. Filing reference number SC2008119. I had brought that clause to Richard's attention when I signed the contract. He had laughed, said it was a motivational provision, said the numbers required to trigger it were put there the same way you put a unicorn in a fairy tale as something aspirational, not expected. Marcus, he had said, if you ever actually hit those numbers, I'll give you anything in this building you want. We had just hit 310%. I made 2 phone calls that night. The first was to our general counsel, Patricia Voss, who I woke up at 10:47 p.m. and who listened to me read the clause aloud in silence and then said, Marcus, where has this been sitting? I told her page 19, section 7, 16 years. She was quiet for 5 full seconds. Then she said, I need to review the full document tomorrow morning, but if it reads the way you're describing, it's enforceable. No question. Richard signed it as an authorized officer of the system. The second call was to Tom Hartigan, who I also woke up, and who answered with the alertness of someone who had spent a decade on overnight logistics shifts and had never fully lost the reflex. I told him to be in early on Friday. He asked why. I told him it was time to come back from his sabbatical. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I never actually went anywhere. Marcus, I've been in my house for 3 months watching things go sideways. I told him to wear his iron shirt. I did not rush. I let Thursday pass. I let Brendan have his all-hands meeting about the Q4 efficiency roadmap, where he introduced a concept he called supply chain mindfulness and used a stock photo of a mountain for the title slide. I sat in the back and said nothing. I let him feel like he was steering something he understood. Because when your leverage is real and documented and sitting in a folder on your desk, patience isn't just a virtue. It's the only strategy that matters. Then came Friday morning and the huddle and the lemon bars and the announcement about the bonuses. And Brendan handed me the exact moment I had been waiting for. He came into my office and sat down without being invited to, which was consistent with every other time he had entered any space in this building. I gestured to the chair across from me anyway, just to establish that we were having a real conversation and not a performance. He launched into something about compensation philosophy and sustainable incentive structures and the importance of building intrinsic motivation in healthcare environments. It sounded like something from a podcast. I let him finish. Then he slid the folder across the desk. He looked at it the way people look at things they're not sure are for them, opened it slowly, found the highlighted page. What am I looking at? He said. Section 7. Addendum B, of my employment contract. Read the highlighted portion. He read it. I watched his face do the thing that faces do when information arrives. That doesn't fit the picture of the world they were operating in 2 minutes ago. The confident angle of his jaw shifted slightly. The skin around his eyes tightened. This is from 2008, he said. It is. Nobody actually enforces provisions from 16 years ago in a completely different organizational structure. It's not a provision. It's a performance trigger clause with a filing reference number and your father's signature. I pulled my phone out. Patricia Voss in legal reviewed it this morning. It's enforceable. Here's her email if you want to read it. He didn't take the phone. Look, he started. I think what we're really talking about is a collaborative conversation about how we align leadership structures with our current strategic. The fiscal year numbers came out yesterday. I interrupted him, the way you interrupt someone when you've heard enough words that don't mean anything. We hit $4.31 million in verified cost reductions against a target of $1.39 million, 310% of benchmark. Your father certified the benchmark in January. I have his signature on that too. He stared at the folder. I stood up. Your father is joining us in the boardroom in 15 minutes. Patricia will be there. So will the department heads. I would suggest you take those 15 minutes to think about how you want to handle this conversation professionally, because the math is done and the document is real and nothing about the next hour is going to go the way you think it is. I walked to the door and opened it. I turned back once. "Bring the folder," I said. "Your father will want to see it." The boardroom at the main campus site had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the hospital's main entrance, and the patient drop-off loop where ambulances move through at all hours. I had always found that view clarifying. Whatever happened in this room, there was always someone out there who needed us to get the small things right. Richard Cole arrived first, before most of the department heads, which surprised me. He was 63 years old and looked it in the way that certain men look their age when they've spent those years actually doing something that mattered. He had built the financial infrastructure of this health system from the ground up over nearly 3 decades. He knew what real numbers looked like and what they required from the people who produced them. He looked at me when he came in. Then he looked at the folder I was holding. Something in his face went very still. "Marcus," he said. "Richard," I said. He sat down at the far end of the table and folded his hands. The others filed in. Patricia from legal, who sat next to me and had a second printed copy of the clause along with the fiscal year certification. Department heads from pharmacy, facilities, clinical operations. Diane, whom I had called the night before and who had driven in from the South Campus at 7 in the morning without asking why. Tom, who had ironed the shirt again. Brendan came in last. He sat down across from his father and did not look at either of us. I kept it clean. Pulled up the fiscal year summary, the same one that Richard's own finance office had produced, walked through the numbers without editorializing. Then I clicked to the scanned contract page, clause highlighted, signature visible on the projection screen. Performance threshold met, I said, 310% of established benchmark, contract provision, activated. Patricia has the formal documentation ready for acknowledgement. The room was the kind of quiet that happens in hospitals sometimes, when something has just been confirmed that everyone knew but nobody had said yet. Richard stared at the screen for a long time. He stared at it the way you stare at something you wrote yourself a long time ago, in a different chapter of your life, when you were still the kind of person who believed that promising something meant delivering it. "Dad," Brendan said, "this is a legacy clause from an organizational context that no longer reflects our current strategic framework. We have to consider whether enforcing an outdated employment provision is consistent with where this institution is going." Richard didn't look at him right away. When he did, his voice was completely level. The voice of a man who had made very difficult decisions for a very long time and had learned to make them without theater. "Brendan," he said, "I signed that document as an authorized officer of this institution. It is a binding contractual commitment. It's not outdated. It's exactly what it was designed to be, a recognition that some contributions deserve real authority, not just appreciation." But he said it again, quieter, his son's name. Nothing else. The silence that followed was not the dramatic kind. It was the settling kind. The kind that happens after something that's been unstable for a long time finally finds its level. Richard turned back to me. "Marcus, what are you requesting?" "Full procurement and vendor contract authority for Q1. Reinstatement of my operations team to their original roles and responsibilities. Direct reporting structure to you. Bypassing any interim organizational layer. And I'd like the year-end bonus commitment honored for every member of the supply chain department, not from this quarter's efficiency savings. From the budget line where it belonged in the first place." Richard looked at Patricia. She nodded. He looked at Brendan for a moment, and in that look I saw something pass between a father and a son that wasn't anger and wasn't disappointment exactly. It was more like the specific grief of a parent watching a child fail in a way that was partly their own. Fault for setting up the conditions. Then he looked back at me. "Approved," he said. "All of it. Patricia will have the paperwork processed by end of day." Brendan picked up his leather notebook and his imported water bottle and walked out of the boardroom without speaking. He didn't slam the door. There was no scene. It was quieter than that, which somehow made it more final. Richard sat in his chair for another minute after the room began to clear. When most of the others had gone, he looked at me. "You held on to that clause for 16 years, he said. I told him I had only needed it once. He nodded slowly. "I want you to know," he said, and his voice was quiet enough that only I could hear it, that I should have seen what was happening in this department 4 months ago and stopped it. I was," he paused, "compromised. In my judgment, I didn't offer him an easy answer to that. I just told him I understood. We shook hands. He left. I stood there for a minute looking out the window at the patient drop-off loop and the ambulance bay and the steady movement of the institution below us, which had continued the entire time, as it always did, because that's what institutions do when the people running the actual work refuse to let them fail. That afternoon, I sent 3 text messages. The first was to Diane. Your accounts are yours again. Full authority restored. See you Monday. The second was to Tom. Process review, sabbatical is over. The routing system launch is back on. I need you Tuesday. The third was to Carl from the receiving dock. Bring your appetite Friday. Diane's making lemon bars again. Diane replied within 2 minutes. Tom sent back nothing but a single thumbs up, which from Tom was the equivalent of a standing ovation. Carl sent 3 separate messages asking what kind of lemon bars and whether there would be enough. Brendan's college roommate, the head of vendor innovation strategy, submitted a letter of resignation the following week, citing personal opportunities in the private sector. Chad, the consultant, the one who hadn't known what par levels were, disappeared from our building so quietly that I'm not entirely sure he was ever officially on site to begin with. His firm invoiced us for 2 months of advisory services. Patricia's team reviewed the deliverables and found that the contractual outcomes had not been met. We recovered the fees without a dispute. The MetaTrust partnership launched in January. By March, their coup had referred us to a second regional coalition looking for the same kind of operational partnership. That conversation turned into a contract worth $14 million in annual supply volume by the second quarter. Richard stepped back from his CFO role 6 months later for reasons that were officially described as planned succession planning. He and I had one final conversation before his last day. He told me he wished he had drawn the line earlier. I told him that most people don't draw the line until they see where the damage goes. That's not a character flaw, I said. It's just how it works. He seemed to find that useful. The new CFO reviewed every department's existing performance contracts in her first 30 days. When she got to mine, she called me into her office and asked if I wanted to renegotiate the clause. I told her I was comfortable leaving it exactly as it was. As long as, I said, the threshold stays at 275%. She smiled and said she thought that was fair. 4 months after everything settled, I got a LinkedIn notification. Brendan Cole had launched a consulting practice called Forward Meridian Advisory Solutions. His services listed included organizational efficiency, transformation, leadership culture optimization, and next-gen stakeholder ecosystem design. The company had 14 followers and a logo that looked like it had been generated in 11 seconds. I closed the tab and went back to the MetaTrust compliance review I had been working on. Here is what I have learned in 16 years of keeping hospitals running. The work does not care about your title. The vendors do not care about your framework. The patients getting wheeled through that lobby do not care about your dashboard. They care whether the right supplies are in the right place at the right time, whether the people managing that process know what they are doing, and whether anyone in that chain has the authority to make the call when something goes wrong at 3 a.m. Brendan learned to speak in strategies. I learned to speak in outcomes. And in a building where the stakes are actual human lives, outcomes are the only language that ultimately matters. The clause stayed in my contract. The new CFO insisted on it. She said it was the most useful performance instrument she had seen in 16 years of healthcare finance.
Some days feel off. Like I'm standing but still falling. A little pain, a little tired, and no one to tell it all to. There are days that feel unsteady, like I'm drifting out of place. Every step just feels so heavy, with a smile I have to fake. A little hurt I keep inside me, a little weight I always hide, and 1,000 quiet worries I've been holding deep inside. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, a little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I keep walking through the silence like it's all I've ever known. Every crowded room reminds me how it feels to be alone. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. Maybe one day I'll be stronger, maybe I'll learn how to speak, but for now I keep it buried in the parts of me too weak. There's no one here to tell it to, no one who would understand. So I carry all these feelings like they're slipping through my hands. A little broken, little lost, trying hard to just get through. All these nights I stay awake with everything I never say to you. I'm freezing, I'm bleeding, slowly fading away. But don't worry, I'm fine. The cold has settled in my heartbeat, like winter living in my veins. Every breath feels numb and fragile, every smile just hides the pain. I'm breaking quietly in silence, falling slow without a sound. Yet I keep saying I'm okay, while my world burns to the ground. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. Maybe pain just learned to live here, maybe sorrow feels like home. So I wear my wounds like armor and survive them all alone. I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. If you ever see me smiling, no, it's just my last defense. 'Cause sometimes love means hiding how much you're suffering. No, I'm frozen here, I'm bleeding slowly, dying piece by piece inside. But I still whisper, it's alright, just to keep you from goodbye. I'm shattered, love, but don't you worry, I'll pretend till my last breath. Even while my soul is fading, I'll say everything's okay. It's okay.